The Keddie murders are an unsolved quadruple homicide which took place over the night of April 11, 1981, in Keddie, California, United States. The victims were Glenna Susan Sharp, daughter Tina Louise Sharp, son, John Stephen Sharp, and John's friend, Dana Hall Wingate. The murders took place in house number 28 of the Keddie Resort. The bodies of Sue, John, and Dana were found on the morning of April 12 by Sue's 14-year-old daughter, Sheila, who had been sleeping at a friend's house. Sue's two younger sons, Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were also in the house, but were unharmed. Tina was missing from the scene. Tina remained a missing person until April 1984, when her skull and several other bones were recovered at Camp 18, near Feather Falls in Butte County. Multiple leads and suspects were examined in the intervening years, though no charges were filed. Several new leads were announced in the 21st century, including the discovery of a hammer in a pond in 2016, as well as announcements regarding the discovery of new DNA evidence. In July 1979, Susan Sharp, along with her 5 children, left their home in Connecticut after separating from her husband, James Sharp. She decided to relocate to Northern California, where her brother Don was residing at the time. Upon arriving in California, she began renting a small trailer formerly occupied by her brother at the Claremont Trailer Village in Quincy. The following fall, she moved to house number 28 in the rural Sierra Nevada Railroad town of Keddie. The house was much larger than the trailer and had become available when Plumas County's then sheriff, Sylvester Douglas Thomas, moved out. There, she resided with her 15-year-old son, John, 14-year-old daughter Sheila, 12-year-old daughter Tina, and 2 younger sons, Rick, age 10, and Greg, age 5. On April 11, 1981, around 11:30 a.m., Sue, Sheila, and Greg drove from the residence of their friends, the Meeks family, to pick up Rick, who was attending baseball tryouts at Gansner Field in Quincy. They happened upon John and his friend, Dana Hall Wingate, hitchhiking at the mouth of the canyon from Quincy to Keddie and picked them up, then driving about 6 miles away to Keddie. 2 hours later, around 3:30 p.m., John and Dana hitchhiked back to Quincy, where they may have had plans to visit friends. Around this time, the two were seen in the city's downtown area. That same evening, Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Seabolt family, who lived in adjacent number 27, while Sue remained at home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' young friend, Justin Smart. Sheila departed house number 28 shortly after 8 p.m. to sleep over at the Seabolts, which she had never before done. Tina, who had been watching television at the Seabolt residence, was told by Sheila that Sue wanted Tina home by 10 p.m., so Tina returned to number 28 around 9:55 p.m. Around 7 a.m. on the morning of April 12, Sheila returned to number 28 and discovered the dead bodies of Sue, John, and Dana in the house's living room. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Tina was absent from the home, while the 3 younger children, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were found physically unharmed in an adjacent bedroom. Initial reports stated that the 3 young boys had slept through the incident, though this was later contradicted. Upon discovering the scene, Sheila rushed back to the Seabolt's house, whereupon Jamie Seabolt retrieved Rick, Greg, and Justin through the bedroom window. He later admitted to having briefly entered the home through the back door to see if anyone was still alive, potentially contaminating evidence in the process. The murders of Sue, John, and Dana were notably vicious. 2 bloodied knives and 1 hammer were found at the scene, and one of the knives, a steak knife later determined to have been used in the murders, had been bent at roughly 30 degrees. Blood spatter evidence from inside the house indicated that the murders of Sue, John, and Dana had all taken place in the living room. Sue was discovered lying on her side near the living room sofa, nude from the waist down and gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, which had been secured with tape. She had been stabbed in the chest, her throat was stabbed horizontally, with a wound going through her larynx and nicking her spine, and on the side of her head was an imprint matching the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline pellet rifle. John's throat was slashed, Dana had multiple head injuries and had been manually strangled to death. John and Dana suffered blunt force trauma to their heads caused by a hammer or hammers. Autopsies determined that Sue and John died from the knife wounds and blunt force trauma, and Dana died by asphyxiation. Sheila and the Siebold family heard no commotion during the night. A couple living in nearby house number 16 was awakened at 1:15 a.m. by what sounded like muffled screaming. Sheila's jacket, shoes, and a toolbox containing various tools were missing from the house, which showed no indication of forced entry. The house's telephone had been taken off the hook and the cord cut from the outlet, and the drapes were closed. Martin Smart, a neighbor and main suspect, claimed that a claw hammer had inexplicably gone missing from his home. Plumas County Sheriff Sylvester Thomas, who presided over the case, later stated that Martin had provided endless clues in the case that seemed to throw the suspicion away from him. In addition to interviewing the Smarts, detectives interviewed numerous other locals and neighbors. Several, including members of the Siebold family, recalled seeing a green van parked at the Sharps' house around 9 p.m. Justin gave conflicting stories of the evening, including that he had dreamed details of the murders, though he later claimed to have actually witnessed them. In his later account of events, told under hypnosis, he claimed to have awoken to sounds coming from the living room while asleep in the bedroom with Rick and Greg. Investigating these sounds, he saw Sue with two men. One with a mustache and short hair, the other clean-shaven with long hair. Both wore glasses. According to Justin, John and Dana then entered the home and began heatedly arguing with the men. A fight ensued, after which Tina entered the room and was taken out of the cabin's back door by one of the men. Based on Justin's descriptions, composite sketches of the two unknown men were produced by Harlan Embry, a man with no artistic ability and no training in forensic sketching. It was never explained why, with access to the Justice Department's and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's top forensic artists, law enforcement chose to use an amateur who sometimes volunteered to help local police. In press releases accompanying the sketches, the suspects were described as being in their late 20s to early 30s, and one stood between 5 feet 11 inches to 6 feet 2 inches tall with dark blonde hair, and the other between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 10 inches with black, greased hair. Both wore gold-framed sunglasses. Rumors regarding the crimes being ritualistic or motivated by drug trafficking were dismissed by Plumas County Sheriff Doug Thomas, who stated in the week following the murders that no drug paraphernalia or illegal drugs were found in the home. Carla McMullen, a family acquaintance, later told detectives that Dana Wingate had recently stolen an unknown quantity of LSD from local drug dealers, though she was unable to provide proof of this claim. About 4,000 man-hours were spent working the case, which Thomas described as frustrating. Tina's disappearance was initially investigated by the FBI as a possible abduction, though it was reported on April 29, 1981, that the FBI had backed off the search as the California State Department of Justice was doing an adequate job and made the FBI's presence unnecessary. A grid-pattern search of the area, covering a 5-mile radius around the house, was conducted with police canines, but the efforts were fruitless. On April 22, 1984, 3 years and 11 days after the murders, a bottle collector discovered the cranium portion of a human skull and part of a mandible at Camp 18, near Feather Falls in neighboring Butte County, roughly 100 miles from Keddie. Shortly after announcing the discovery, the Butte County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous call that identified the remains as belonging to Tina, but the call was not documented in the case. A recording of this call was found at the bottom of an evidence box at some point after 2013 by a deputy who was assigned the case. The remains were confirmed by a forensic pathologist to be those of Tina in June 1984. Near the remains, detectives also discovered a blue nylon jacket, a blanket, a pair of Levi Strauss jeans with a missing back pocket, and an empty medical tape dispenser. The house in which the murders occurred was demolished in 2004. In a 2008 documentary on the murders, Marilyn Smart claimed that she suspected her husband Martin and his friend John Bobade were responsible for the murders. Marilyn claimed that on the evening of April 11, 1981, she had left Martin and Bobade at a local bar around 11 p.m. and returned home to go to sleep. Around 2 a.m. on April 12, she stated she awoke to find the two burning an unknown item in the wood stove. Additionally, she alleged that Martin hated Johnny Sharp with a passion. However, in the 2008 documentary, Sheriff Deb Thomas said he had personally interviewed Martin and that he had passed a polygraph examination. According to a 2016 article published by the Sacramento Bee, Martin had left Keddie and driven to Reno, Nevada, shortly after the murders. From there, he sent a letter to Marilyn, ruminating on personal struggles in their marriage, which he concluded with, "I've paid the price of your love and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." In a 2016 interview, Gamberg stated that the letter was overlooked in the initial investigation and never admitted as evidence. He later criticized the quality of the initial investigation, saying, "You could take someone just coming out of the academy, and they'd have done a better job." A counselor whom Martin regularly visited also alleged that he had admitted to the murders of Sue and Tina but claimed, "I didn't have anything to do with the boys." He allegedly told the counselor that Tina was killed to prevent her from identifying him, as she had witnessed the whole thing. Martin Smart died of cancer in Portland, Oregon, in June 2000. John Babade, who allegedly had ties to organized crime in Chicago, died there in 1988. In April 2018, Gamberg stated that DNA evidence recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. If you found this video intriguing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating content.